Doug's crayfish. Start a hook in the vise. With pliers, cut the area of lead right behind the hook eye, leaving a small jig head. Separate that little piece of lead away from the head, making sure not to cut the hook wire in the process. Once you do that, go in horizontal with your pliers and cut the rest of it off, again making sure not to cut the hook in the process. As soon as that lead's off, start your thread right behind the jig head. Take wraps all the way down to the bend and now back up, creating a good thread base. Cut the tag end of thread off. Grab a strand of crystal flash. Fold it in half and then fold it in half again over the thread. Tie it right behind the jig head. Take wraps of thread down to the bend. Cut this second of crystal flash off to about 1.5 to 2 times the hook shank in length. Cut 2 fibers smaller than the other 2. They should be about half the length of the longer 2. Now cut off a clump of deer hair from the hide. This should be about 1/4 the width of a pencil. Tie it in at the bend of the hook. They should be sticking out at about 1/2 times the hook shank. Wrap all the fibers down to the head to create a nice even body. Make sure to cover any stragglers that may be sticking out, although it's not absolutely necessary as it will be covered by dubbing later. Now take your furry foam. Measure a piece about the width of your hook gap and cut a 2-inch length piece out. Then, on one of the ends of the furry foam, take slant cuts to make it like an arrow shape. This will help tie it down to the hook shank. Invert your hook and with the furry foam tie it now on top of the hook, right at the bend, making sure that it is now on top so when you fold it back, it will be directly on top without leaning to one side or the other. Now, grab a zonker strip. Separate a clump of fibers about 1/2 times the width of a pencil. Bring your hook back to normal and measure that little clump to be about 1 times the hook shank, and then tie it on the far side of the hook. Do the same to the near side. These will represent the claws. This will also help taper the body a bit. Once it's secure, just take wraps of thread to create a nice smooth body. Grab some hackle, some saddle hackle, in this case, ginger. Strip it from the little hide, and then cut all the fuzzies and unwanted fibers away from the stem. Cut the stem off as you won't need that big of a stem to secure it. Tie it with the shiny side facing towards you. Tie it all the way to right behind the claws. Then create a small dubby noodle on your thread. About 3 or 4 inches should do it. Take touching wraps to create a nice bulbous thorax. It should cover about 1/3 of the hook shank. Once you do that, just leave your thread there and take open spiral wraps of hackle down the little dubbed body. About 4 or 5 should do it. Once you reach bare thread, tie the stem off and cut it. Then pull the fibers back and take a couple more wraps of thread to get them out of the way. Then take a 5 to 6 inch piece of wire from the spool. This should create numerous flies. Tie it in on the far side of the hook shank and bring it towards you, making sure that it won't slip out during the future tying process. After that's good and secure, leave your thread there and create yet another 3 to 4 inch dubbing noodle, and then take the wraps backward, covering the remaining thread. Once you reach the jig head, you should be good. If you need to take some dubbing off, that's fine. Invert your hook again, and with scissors, cut the fibers that are now on top of the hook or might get into the furry foam's way. Fold the furry foam back and push the little eye through the furry foam. Then just take a couple wraps of thread over the furry foam to secure it down. You can cut the furry foam tail just now, not to shape, just to get it out of the way a little bit. Then take 1 wrap of wire directly behind the wraps of hackle, and then continue with open spiral even wraps down the body. About 4 or 5 should do it. Secure the wire with thread, then bring your thread up and helicopter the wire off. Whip finish your thread, and then cut it off. The tail should be about 1/4 to 1/8 of the body. I also like to round the tips. This is not absolutely necessary. I also like to add eyes with a permanent marker. I then also like to add orange polka dots. This is not necessary, and you can color it to how the crayfish look in your area. And that's Doug's Crayfish.